Turkey's president has promised to rebuild thousands of homes in 1 year, while much-needed aid crosses into rebel-held northern Syria. NATO has vowed to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, as defence ministers call for more ammunition production.
The Chinese and Iranian presidents meet in Beijing to strengthen economic ties in the face of Western sanctions.
After a poor run of form in the Premier League, Chelsea will be looking to bounce back this evening in the Champions League.
Exhaustion in Turkey and Syria after more than a week of non-stop searching for survivors, following what the World Health Organization has called the worst natural disaster in 100 years. The combined death toll following the February 6th earthquakes has passed 41,000 and is showing no signs of slowing down. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been visiting some of the survivors in hospital. He has promised new homes to replace the thousands that have been destroyed, and he has vowed to build them across the 10 affected areas within a year. It's a pledge proving difficult for emergency teams to understand, as they struggle to pick through towering piles of rubble with little prospect of clearing it in sight. But aid agencies and governments are stepping up efforts to bring help to devastated areas. The situation in Syria is particularly desperate, where over a decade of civil war has complicated relief efforts and political wrangling has delayed help. On Tuesday, an aid convoy finally passed through a reopened border crossing into rebel-held northwestern Syria. The UN has launched a €370 million appeal to provide, quote, life-saving relief for nearly 5 million Syrians for 3 months. As Russia increases its attacks in Ukraine's south and east, defending soldiers on the front lines say they urgently need more ammunition and planes to win the war. While Moscow has at times reportedly been firing a staggering 20,000 artillery shells a day, Ukraine is supposedly firing up to a fraction of this, some 6,000 to 7,000. But at this rate, Ukraine is still using up ammunition far faster than its allies can provide it. NATO defence ministers currently taking part in a 2-day meeting in Brussels have been urged by the military alliance chief to ramp up ammunition production, but there is no decision on providing jet fighters.
We are ready to start in just a moment. NATO allies are providing unprecedented support to Ukraine to help uphold its right of self-defence. And from the start, we have been working very closely with the European Union, determined to support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
It's widely believed Russia is planning a new offensive soon, but in the meantime it is piling on the pressure near the village of Bakhmut. If it were captured, it would give Russia a significant symbolic boost ahead of the first anniversary of the war.
A depiction of happiness which masks something far more sinister. These are children from Donbass and other Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine who were taken to be handed over to Russian families and given Russian nationality. President Putin's Commissioner for Children's Rights defends it as an act of love for orphan children who have no one to take care of them. But an investigation by the EBU Investigative Journalism Network reveals that many of these kids do have families and were taken to Russia under false pretenses or without their consent.
Not only is forcible transfer a war crime, but also adopting children during time of war is also completely against international law. But Russia changed its laws in May to allow these children to be given Russian nationality, and that's happened in hundreds of cases.
Injured children were also taken to filtration camps. Alexander went to one of them with his mother. She was interrogated and didn't pass the screening process. The young boy said he wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. Alexander's grandmother was able to rescue him before he was transferred. They have no news of what's happened to the mother. Natalia sent her daughter to a summer camp organised by Moscow-designated authorities in Kozar-Chelopanya, one of the first Ukrainian cities to be occupied. She was able to see her daughter Karina again, but other mothers haven't been so fortunate.
Does she think that the Russians want to keep the children?
Да.
Да?
Да. Ну, потому що ті, хто половину поїхав, повиїжджав ночі, вони вже практично роблять всі там паспорта і остаються там. Сюди їм, як сказали, типа не розрішають в'їжджати, но я в це не вірю.
Ukraine says this is akin to genocide, while this human rights lawyer says it goes beyond a war crime.
Well, the forcible transfer of children, as we see it, is clearly a war crime. But it's also a crime against humanity because it is being carried out on a widespread and systematic level, but also because it's being carried out in the context of crimes against humanity.
Much more than a courtesy visit. Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi met in Beijing with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping on Tuesday. This in a context of growing international tension and deteriorating relations with Western countries. The leaders renewed their vows of friendship and expressed a will to deepen economic ties between Iran and China. And both want to continue along the path initiated last September at the Samarkand summit, where Tehran submitted its application to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, along with China, Russia, Pakistan and India. Both countries are also linked by their relations with Russia, although in a very different way. While Tehran supplies weapons and drones to the Russian army, Beijing defends Ukraine's sovereignty, although it does claim to understand the reasons behind Moscow's invasion.
First cars, now trucks and buses, as Brussels targets both in its efforts to make the transport sector carbon neutral. Under the European Commission's plans presented Tuesday, every new bus within the EU cities would have to be emission-free by 2030. The lorry sector will also have to reduce its emissions, but by 90% by 2040, rather than by a full 100%.
Il faut aussi tenir compte des circonstances très spécifiques liées à des conditions climatiques. On parle de moyens de transport qui sont très très lourds, donc qui ont besoin d'une énorme quantité d'énergie. Et vous savez très bien que dans des conditions climatiques qui sont, par exemple, le froid ou dans des régions montagnardes, on doit avoir quand même la possibilité de continuer à un certain moment avec des moteurs thermiques.
The aim is part of an effort to electrify vehicles. Road transport currently accounts for 1/5 of greenhouse gas emissions in the EU and 1/3 of energy consumption. In the European Parliament, some MEPs are welcoming these proposals and believe that the negotiations should be easier compared to those on car emissions.
Sur les bus, je m'attends par exemple à un soutien assez large, puisque des collectivités locales de tous les bords politiques ont déjà soutenu ce type d'initiative. Et sur les camions, il y a une question à résoudre, qui est: est-ce que l'on est favorable aux 90% 2040 ou est-ce qu'on est favorable aux 100% 2040 ? Ça fait une question. Donc je pense qu'on doit être capable d'aller plus vite que ce que l'on a fait sur les voitures et clôturer ce texte sous cette mandature.
MEPs also approved on Tuesday legislation banning the sale of new diesel and petrol cars from 2035, which the European Council must now rubber stamp for approval.
Carmaker Ford is about to cut 4,000 jobs across Europe, including about 2,300 in Germany and 1,300 in the UK. It intends to achieve the reductions through voluntary redundancies, mostly in engineering roles and administrative jobs. The US carmaker blames losses on rising costs and a need to switch to electric vehicle production. However, Ford is to invest €3.03 billion in its first lithium iron phosphate EV battery plant in the US. Musician and entrepreneur Pharrell Williams has become designer giant Louis Vuitton's next creative director of menswear. The appointment fills one of fashion's most high-profile vacancies, one open since Virgil Abloh died in November 2021. Williams is no stranger to fashion. In 2003, he and Japanese designer Nigo founded Billionaire Boys Club, a clothing, accessories and lifestyle brand. Louis Vuitton is the juggernaut that helps power the wider Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy luxury empire.
Chelsea will be looking to make up for their poor league form when they travel to Borussia Dortmund this evening. With only one win in 8 games, the Blues' trip to Germany could prove to be very tricky. Graham Potter's men are currently 10th in the Premier League, and their captain Cesar Azpilicueta knows that his team will have to show more in the final third if they want to reach the quarter-finals.
The reality is that we are not in the best form of results lately, but it's a new competition, and now it's time to prove it on the pitch. We have to go step by step. I think it's not worth to look really far ahead.
Dortmund, who didn't spend as much as their opponents during the winter transfer market, seem to be more solid and are currently third in the Bundesliga after having won their last 6 games. Deprived of their young star Youssoufa Moukoko due to an ankle injury, the Germans will still be able to rely on Sebastian Haller, who scored 11 goals in the Champions League last year with Ajax. The Ivorian international has recently returned to the squad after months of battling cancer. In the other match, Club Brugge host Benfica, and Scott Parker's men will have their work cut out against a confident Portuguese side that finished first in Group H ahead of PSG and Juventus.